up next on YCU News. It's Election Day in Claremont and other New Hampshire cities. The country is moving closer to outlawing sex-based discrimination in the workplace, and federal health officials are scrutinizing how the psychiatric hospital, the Brattleboro Retreat, treats its patients. For more news, weather, and sports, it's time for YCU, your local view.
Now, your daily digest of the Dartmouth Lake Sunapee region and central Vermont. News, sports, weather, public affairs, and all that's happening in our area. The news on YCU, your local view.
Good evening, I'm Rose Spillman. Thank you for joining us for this Tuesday edition of YCU News. Locally and across large cities in the U.S., voters will go to the polls to cast ballots. It's Election Day in Claremont and other New Hampshire cities, including Concord and Laconia to the east, Berlin to the north, and Keene to the south. The outcome of today's elections will help set these cities' directions and goals. In Claremont, voters will decide if the city should look at its governing rules. To do so, if voters approve this ballot question today, a charter commission will be formed. The commission would need to decide if the city needed to change, update, or add new rules and regulations in how it functions. The adoption of a new charter would go to voters at a later date. It has been since the early 2000s that the charter was last studied. The polls in Claremont closed today at 7 p.m. The country is moving closer to outlawing sex-based discrimination in the workplace. The U.S. Senate voted Monday night, 61-30, to move forward a bill to protect the rights of gay, transgender, or bisexual Americans. The Senate's support paves the way for the U.S. House of Representatives to study the bill. Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders, an independent, says the Senate's vote will benefit all workers. The vote is an important and long overdue step in making America a democratic and inclusive society, Sanders says in a press release. It's been 20 years since the U.S. Senate introduced legislation protecting gay and lesbian rights in the workplace, Sanders says. Sanders says Vermont has been a leader in protecting workers' rights. Vermont has banned discrimination based on sexual orientation since 1992. In 2007, that protection was extended to include Vermonters who identify themselves as transgendered. Federal healthcare officials are scrutinizing how the psychiatric hospital, the Brattleboro Retreat, treats its patients. On Monday, members of the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services arrived at the retreat. They are expected to meet with retreat staff to review hospital practices and patient treatments, reports VermontBiz.com, an online business magazine. Federal funds help the retreat, as it is known, pay its bills. Retreat employees at all levels need to show they are competent to carry out treatment programs. The retreat staff has until November 15th to prove it is qualified and able to treat patients under medically approved guidelines. If not, the hospital could close. Examples of faulty practices include involuntarily restraining and medicating patients. And Brattleboro police were called to the retreat to handle matters that the hospital staff should have been able to take care of. Up to 24 patients can be helped at the retreat. Now, federal health officials must be sure the help these men and women receive is acceptable. A meeting tonight at Valley Regional Hospital in Claremont could lead to bringing the hospital back into the graces of Anthem health insurers. Valley Regional is one of the 10 hospitals across the state that Anthem is not including in its list of hospitals that will accept patients covered under the Affordable Care Act. Claremont resident John Cloutier, who also is a state representative, says he is planning to meet with Valley Regional CEO Peter Wright tonight to discuss this issue. Cloutier reports WNTK Radio is filing a House bill asking that Anthem accept insurance from at least one hospital in each of the state's 10 counties. Sullivan County residents with health insurance under the Affordable Health Care Exchange are expected to go to Dartmouth Hitchcock Medical Center in Lebanon. For Claremont residents without a car, plus other Sullivan County residents in the same situation, this could be very difficult. U.S. Representative Ann McLean Custer is joining House colleagues in calling for President Obama to review how the National Security Agency acts. Republican and Democrat congressmen and women want the White House to see if the NSA is going too far in spying on Americans. The proposal calls for a top-to-bottom review of the NSA. Its best programs would be reviewed and tweaked if needed, says Custer in a prepared statement. The worst programs of the NSA, such as tracking citizens' private emails and cell phone calls, need to be prohibited, Custer says. The right to privacy, or the right to be left alone, needs to be protected as outlined under the Bill of Rights. Under the USA Freedom Act, reforms to the NSA would strengthen the agency's ability to keep citizens safe from domestic or foreign harm. At the same time, the NSA would not go overboard in eavesdropping on private conversations. Such personal phone calls and emails need to be filtered out, the Freedom Act states. Vermont Senator Patrick Leahy and Republican Representative Jim Sensenbrenner of Wisconsin introduced the Freedom Act on October 29th. Now we have the YCU weather forecast for the Connecticut River Valley and Lake Sunapee region. Tomorrow we have a high of 54 degrees with lows in the 40s. Thursday will bring some rain with highs in the 50s and a low of 27 degrees. Friday should be sunny with a high of 44 and lows in the mid-20s. Saturday will have a high in the 40s with a low of 30 degrees. And Sunday may have a few showers with a high of 45 and lows in the 20s. If you're in the Thetford, Vermont area this Friday, head over to the Eclipse Grange Theater for the Shadow Box, a show starting at 7:30 p.m. And now it's time to look at some weekend high school sports scores. On Friday, the Stevens Cardinals football team took on Raymond. It was an outstanding win by Stevens, who beat Raymond 34-6. In boys soccer, the Cardinals were defeated by the Sanborn Indians. The game was part of the Division III quarterfinals. The score was originally 2-2, but a penalty kick competition decided the fate of the game. Sanborn came out on top with 5 points to Stevens' 3 points. I'm Rose Spillman for YCU, your local view. Good night.